If they provoke you and you react, you already belong to them. Because emotion is a disguised command, and whoever obeys someone else's command stops being in control. That is where modern manipulation begins. Not with visible chains, but with precise stimuli, notifications, looks, calculated silences. And you jump, you respond, you justify yourself. And by doing so, you hand over control of time, framing, and outcome. Because the one who reacts lives in tow, and whoever lives in tow never leads, he only chases. And while you believe you're deciding, you're merely executing scripts written by others, bosses, partners, markets, opinions. And that predictability is a security breach. Because if they can anticipate your response, they can push you. And if they can push you, they can take you wherever they want. That's why the first discipline is not strength or talent, but restraint. Stopping the impulse, absorbing the impact, holding position. Because when you don't react, you break the chain and reclaim command. Sun Tzu understood that victory is not decided in the clash, but in the prior decomposition. Because the enemy who manages to disturb you has already entered your system. He doesn't need to defeat you, only push you out of your center. And today, that push doesn't come with swords, but with subtle provocations, comparisons, artificial urgency, criticism designed to touch your pride. And when you bite the hook, you lose strategic altitude. Because your mind stops operating and starts defending itself. And defense is always an inferior position. While you spend emotional energy, they gain time, information, and advantage. Because every uncontrolled emotion is an open crack, and mental discipline consists of sealing those cracks, keeping the structure intact, and forcing the enemy to face you on your terrain, not on theirs. Mental discipline cannot be seen, but it can be felt, because it is the armor that prevents external impacts from penetrating your internal structure. And the unarmored man lives in psychological exposure, reacting to every stimulus as if it were a real threat, while the strategist filters, classifies, discards. And that capacity to choose is power, because not everything deserves a response, and not everything deserves energy. And when you train the mind to decide before feeling, you reverse the natural order of the civilian, who first reacts and then thinks. And that reversal makes you dangerous, because while others burn, you remain operational. And the one who remains operational under pressure always ends up dominating the scenario. Manipulation requires internal noise to operate, because a noisy mind seeks immediate relief, and relief is the entry point of control. That's why inner silence is not relaxation, but neutralization of the enemy. And when your thoughts stop shouting, provocations lose their effect, because they find no surface to bounce off. And silence is not emptiness, but tactical space, where you observe without urgency and decide without pressure. And in that space, manipulation becomes clumsy, obvious, almost ridiculous, because whoever tries to push you exposes himself, and once exposed, he loses advantage. Thus, inner silence becomes an invisible minefield that protects your position without firing a single shot. Responding quickly seems like strength, but it is submission to the other's rhythm, because whoever sets the tempo controls the interaction, and mental discipline consists of breaking that tempo, introducing delay, creating space between stimulus and response, because in that space, you regain command. And while the other waits, doubts, grows impatient, you reorganize. And that simple delay alters the hierarchy, because now he revolves around your silence, not the other way around. Time becomes your ally. Every second you don't respond increases your control and reduces his influence. And when you finally decide to act, you don't react, you execute. And execution always outweighs impulsive reply. That's when the real advantage is revealed, not reacting. Because whoever does not react cannot be manipulated. And this capacity is not common. It is a mental weapon reserved for the 1%, dangerous to teach, and exposed only to those who are ready. The manipulable mind is predictable because it repeats reactions like an automaton, and what repeats can be exploited. That's why mental discipline demands breaking patterns, varying responses, denying expectations, because unpredictability disarms any attempt at control. And when the enemy cannot anticipate your reaction, he loses the ability to push you. He begins to doubt. And doubt is paralysis. And paralysis is silent defeat. Because whoever doesn't know what to expect does not dare to provoke. And so you become unsafe ground, a non-hackable system, where every attempt at manipulation costs too much and yields too little. Every unnecessary yes is a crack in your structure, because accepting without filtering grants direct access to your time, your energy, and your mind, and the manipulator survives on easy access. That's why no is not rejection. It is perimeter defense. And the disciplined man does not explain his refusal. He executes it, because explaining is negotiating, and negotiating is giving ground. And when you close access points without noise, you reprogram the environment. You teach that not everything is available, and what is not available is respected. Thus, the constant, silent no becomes an invisible wall that keeps your mind beyond enemy reach. Desire is raw energy, and energy without control is useless explosion. That's why mental discipline does not eliminate hunger. It contains it, doses it, directs it. Because the man ruled by ambition is easy to manipulate. Promise him something, and he moves. The strategist knows this. That's why he never negotiates from need. He accumulates first, waits next, and acts only when advantage is clear. And that waiting tightens the environment, because everyone wants something from you, and you need nothing from them. And that asymmetry turns your calm into power, and their urgency into weakness. The civilian feels first and evaluates later, and in that sequence, he loses. Because emotion clouds calculation. Mental discipline reverses the process. Evaluate first, feel later, if at all. Because under pressure, there is no space for catharsis, only for decision. And whoever can decide without disturbance becomes a reference point. While others break, you hold form. And that stability in chaotic environments generates automatic authority. Because the group follows the one who does not decompose, and the enemy fears the one he cannot read. Thus, operational coldness does not make you inhuman. It makes you effective. When you no longer react, when you don't explain, when you don't rush, when you don't take offense, you become impossible to manipulate. Because there are no levers left to pull. The enemy runs out of tools, and he begins to retreat, not out of visible fear, but calculation. Because the cost is uncertain and the gain doubtful. And so you complete the mental discipline Sun Tzu anticipated: to dominate without fighting, to resist without hardening, to control without displaying. And in the modern world of constant noise, artificial urgency, and permanent stimulation, that discipline separates you from the mass. It makes you stable, autonomous, and dangerously free. Because you no longer play the game of reacting. You play the game of deciding. And the one who decides is always ahead, even when he appears still.